Welcome to the Mindful Return podcast. I'm Kelly Tuttle, a retired neurology nurse practitioner and brain injury survivor. Together, we'll explore practical tools and real stories to help you rebuild focus, confidence, and a meaningful life after a brain injury. All right, welcome back. I hope you are doing good today. On this podcast episode, we're going to talk about recovery after a brain injury. I remember hearing a brain injury survivor say that their family member had told them, "Why can't you just get over it? Just get over your brain injury. You look fine. Why are you still having issues?" And it really just kind of made my heart sink because it's really hard to explain what it's like to navigate the world with a brain that has been changed, processes things slower, gets tired easier, even though on the outside you may look fine. Everyone's recovery from a brain injury is going to be as different and unique as their personality. So while you're recovering, try not to compare yourself to other brain injury survivors. Don't let anybody else do that either. Even if you have a similar brain type injury as compared to someone else, it depends on how your brain responds to the assault that happened. So it's really just a unique journey that only you're going to experience. Realize that most people get better within 2 to 3 weeks. Some people get a huge improvement after 6 months. Sometimes you'll hear, well, your healing continues up to 2 years, but then after that, it ends, which is not true. Just after 2 years, the first 2 years, you will see leaps and bounds in your recovery. But after that, then it's going to be just these incremental and subtle changes. And that's why I always recommend that people start to journal their brain injury symptoms and abilities early in the recovery so they can monitor its progress, better communicate what's going on with their brain with others, and also have a resource to look back to see how far you've come. And from your journal, it's like your journal will be that person in your life that you're getting better, you're doing better. So keep up the good work, kind of thing. So with the brain being injured and needing to recover, we don't have a standard idea it's how long it's going to take to get better. Unlike if you were to break your ankle, you would expect to wear a cast for 6 to 8 weeks and it would be better, and you would do physical therapy and eventually you'd be up and walking. We don't have those type of guidelines for brain injuries in the in the frontline healthcare system. So you really aren't going to get a straight answer. A lot of times, even I would just tell my patients, we just have to wait and see. I don't know. If I did know, I definitely would tell you, but we just don't know how your healing's going to progress. And even with that, if you think of someone having an ankle fracture, usually there are some people who, after their therapies and getting out of the cast and so forth, that ankle to them is more weak. It's easier to twist. It aches in the winter and it swells up when they stand too long. It's never really quite the same as it was prior to fracturing their ankle. So with that in mind, it makes me think, why would anybody expect a very delicate organ that's just super squishy to heal in a couple weeks and be perfectly fine after a certain amount of time? I mean, I have like a scar on my arm from my car accident, and I have to look at that scar and remind myself, if my skin can't heal back to the way it was prior to my car accident, why would I expect that of my brain, a more complicated and a more delicate organ? So we really do need to have some compassion and patience with our recovery. And, things may not go back to where they were before your brain injury, but you certainly can learn how your brain decides to do things. And just because it can't do it one way, most of the time there are other techniques and tools that you can use to help support it do it a different way. So while you're recovering, you really need to embrace the comfort of uncertainty and really just being in the moment, living each day as it comes, and try not to worry about the future and just do the best you can today in supporting your health and your brain's healing. The other thing that I have found when researching about brain healing, because I'm a brain nerd and I'll read anything that has to do with the brain. But in my research, I ran across a research paper that talked about microglia activation after a traumatic brain injury can persist up to 17 years. Now, what did I say? That was really weird. That came out of my mouth. What this research paper looked at and discovered was that the microglia, which is immune cells in the brain, they get activated after the brain injury and the assault. They're the ones that come in and clean up the debris and so forth. Well, what they're finding is that they continue to be more active than they should be. And this stimulates inflammation in the brain. So even after 17 years after your brain injury, you still may have neural inflammation. And neural inflammation interferes with brain processes and the brain cells functioning, in your ability to cognitively think and process and so forth. So symptoms are persisting and it's greater than 5 or 10 years. This research paper is looking at this being one of the reasons and the causes. So there is this movement, it's been going on for a little bit in the brain injury space, that brain injury is no longer an acute incident or episode like a cold. It's, a concussion is a brain injury, and it used to be thought as a one-time event, and eventually it was taken off your problem list in your medical history in your chart. And there was this belief that you were better, or you were at a point that you would be after such an injury to your brain. But now we're realizing that it's more of a chronic condition. And with it, with that perception change of it being a chronic condition, that means that brain injuries should be continually monitored and offered support and therapies throughout the recovery process, however long that is. And, when I worked in neurology, I'm now retired. I would always count like how many brain injuries my patients had in the past. That was like one of my questions, because if they had a brain injury in the past, then they were at higher risk for epilepsy, Parkinson's type diseases. So whatever I could do to help and support the quality of their life, the function of their brain, and the health of their brain, I would do that. And I would say, let my patients know, hey, you've had brain injury such and such a time, and we need to make sure that you are protecting your brain, have the discussion of seatbelts in cars and helmets, and eating healthy to prevent vascular dementia, which can happen if you have diabetes, uncontrolled diabetes, high cholesterol, blood pressure, high blood pressure. So I'm just trying to kind of create like the perception that I had when I was caring for my patients, but it's not really been moved yet to the front line of healthcare providers. But hopefully soon rather than later, this will become something that, you'll be asked at a physical appointment, your annual physical appointment. How many times have you hit your head? Have you fallen? Have you been in a car accident? And digging deep into that and helping to prevent future assaults to the brain. Again, I talk a lot about journaling and to monitor your progress. The nice thing about the journal, like I said before, is it gives you ability to look back and realize how far you've come. Like when I look back at my journal, I wrote down that I had difficulty making coffee and toast at the same time. So I had to stop and just make the cup of coffee. And then once it was done and in my hand, I could go make the toast, right? Because if I made them at the same time, I would go to the couch, sit down with my cup of coffee, and wonder why I was hungry because I left the toast in the toaster. Or I would set down my cup of coffee to go get the toast, and I would forget where I put the cup of coffee. So it was really quite funny when looking back. But when I was able to look back and see that progress, it really gave me a lot of hope and helped me with my patients in regards to my recovery. And if you're someone who doesn't know how to journal or is not sure how to journal, I do have a brain injury recovery journal that is on Amazon that you can get. To find it, you can type in my name, Kelly Tuttle, or you can type in my brain injury recovery journal and it'll pop up for you. I created that journal for brain injury survivors. So you start off just with writing the date down, and then there's these checkoff boxes like, did you sleep good? How many hours? Did you get time outside? Did you practice some mindfulness? All really nice little tools to kind of like look at, see if that day was a good brain day or if that day was a bad brain day. There are some things that can increase the risk of your recovery being prolonged. Some of them is a history of migraine headaches, depression and anxiety, if you are female or older, and if you've had previous traumatic brain injuries. So if you had, like, for instance, a brain injury when you were in school, you fell off the swing or your bike or something like that, and then you have another injury later in your 20s, and you may see your old symptoms reappear, or it could be they take longer to go away and for you to recover. So each brain injury over time can be cumulative. That's why brain injury prevention and brain health becomes really important after having a concussion or a brain injury, because you don't want to add on to what's already happened in the past. Just to give you an idea of my recovery, the first year, all I did was try to get to work, and to do so, I had to do a lot of sleeping. I was the single income earner and benefit earner for the home, so it was really important for me to go to work. So how did I do that with a brain that was healing? Was I would wake up in the morning and go to work, and then I would go to work, take a nap at lunch, get through the other half of the day, get home. I would sleep for 2 hours, wake up for an hour to get ready for the next day of work, and then sleep for the rest of the night. And I did that for at least a year or two. And then the weekends were spent sleeping 12 to 14, sometimes with a 2 hour nap, lots and lots of sleeping. So that was my first year. And then about year 3, I was able to have a little bit more energy at the end of the day and start to walk and exercise on the weekends. And in the 4th year, I was doing better, and my headaches resolved. I had a headache most days of the week for 4 years straight, and it was nice when they finally decreased and dissipated. And then about year 5 is when I started to write my book, and I love the fact that I made the decision to write my book because there was a ton of learning that went into writing my book, and I think that really helped with my recovery and building new connections and supporting the improvement of the cognitive processes of my brain. So, like I said, you may not get back to yourself 100%. So it's important to, and things differently could be relying on lists and calendars to help support your memory, whereas before you never needed to write anything down. You can remember it all. So that might be one of the changes that might be permanent after your brain injury. If you're having difficulty getting your caregiver to understand what you're going through, I would recommend that you invite them to all of your appointments. And that includes the doctor appointments, speech therapy, physical therapy, mental health therapy, because they're going to help explain what you're going through, and they're going to support the education your caregiver needs to understand what you're going through. And you can even tell the provider that you're seeing that day, hey, can you explain that to so and so who helps take care of me. I tried to explain this and they think it's that I'm being lazy or something like that. And that provider can go to bat for you too and explaining what's going on. The other thing you can have your caregiver do is have them read or listen to my book after the crash, or other traumatic brain injury books, or go to the library and get books on brain injuries and caregiver. Being a caregiver of someone with a brain injury, that will really help them, kind of educate them what to expect with your recovery and why, you're, doing this or doing that, or you have sound sensitivity or noise sensitivity, and the importance of creating safe spaces and quiet spaces in the home for you to go to recoup and recover. The other thing you could do is share with your caregiver my podcast, or have them follow other traumatic brain injury survivor podcasts. There's caregiver podcasts out there too, so they can check that out. They can also, you can have your caregiver go to a caregiver support group. So when I went to support group for brain injuries, at the same time, there was a caregiver support groups. Check into your community, see if there's a support group, and if that they have simultaneous brain injury survivor support group along at the same time as a caregiver support group, and they can learn a lot from other caregivers. So remember that your recovery will be unique as your personality. Celebrate the milestones, the small improvements, the big improvements. Journal your recovery and look back at how far you've come, at least every 6 months. And then if you're into a journey as long as mine, every year, to see just how things have changed and improved. Do your speech therapy, physical therapy, any of those therapy exercises. Even if you've been discharged from care, you should continue to be doing those therapies. And if they become easy, then start to challenge yourself with harder exercises and tasks. It's, the recovery, it's all about just baby steps every day and taking day by day. And some days you're going to have a good brain day and you can really push yourself to grow stronger. And other days you're going to have bad brain days and you're just going to want to just relax and do the minimum. Yeah, that's just kind of the way it can look for your recovery. So keep moving forward with patience and being gentle to yourself and compassionate. The understanding of your brain is just a very complicated, squishy organ that we have way too many high expectations for when it gets knocked around. So I hope this information was helpful. I hope you get better and stronger. You take care. Talk to you later. You've been listening to the Mindful Return podcast with me, Kelly Tuttle. Subscribe wherever you listen and head to kellytuttle.org for brain injury recovery tools, free resources, and inspiration to help you return to work with confidence and hope.